Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurumritamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajanulambita Bhujo Kanakabhadatu Sankirtanaya Kapitaro Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunabhotari Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Suharito Gauradayi Pushpavanto Chitro Sangha Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Pavaya Charanasaka Sukado Paramananda Sundaro Subhalantriyo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Shri Gauri Vaishnava Parampara Ki Jai Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai Bol Premanande Welcome. So reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita, I started some classes a couple of weeks back. Beginning with the narrative that begins in chapter 7. We are interrupted by various festivals and other services, so I want to return to that now and just in brief to refresh the memories of those who have been listening. This is an interesting chapter in that the beginning of the chapter ends the discussion, Krishna's discussion of his own Mangal charm, in his auspicious invocation that consists of 14 verses, the last of which corresponds considerably with the first, in that both of them offer respect to the Panchatattva, with the exception that the first verse includes also a pranam to Guru Tattva. So, Vande Gurun Ishatat, Ishan Isha Bhatarakam, Isha Bhatkan, Ishan Isha Bhatarakam, Tat Prakasham, Tat Shakti, Krishna Chaitanya, Shankara. So, the Gurus, he offers his obeisances to the Guru Tattva principle and a plurality of Gurus, and then Isha Bhaktan, Isha Avatarakam to the devotees, to the avatar, Tat Prakasham to the expansion, the avatar being the descent from the Paravyom, the expansion being the forms of the Lord that remain within the Paravyom for Leela there. The avatar personality, or the personality that personifies the avatar principle in his book, and is Advaita and Nityananda, the Prakash, the Bhakta, Vishal Bhakta, Srivas, Thakur, Tat Prakashams. This has Shakti. Shakti here refers then to Gadadhar Pandit, Yantaranga Shakti, Swarup Shakti, the Bhakti is concentrated out, and Krishna Chaitanya, the Godhead himself. These are the five, of course. And then again, the last verse, which is explained in brief in the 7th chapter, is Panchatattva-atmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. The five principles are again mentioned. This last verse being a verse of perhaps Swarup Damodar's verse, I believe, included in the work of Kavi Karnapur. It's one instance. There are other instances of how Krishnadas Kaviraj has imported verses of other great devotees and employed them in his Mangal Charan, the verses of a verse of Rupa Goswami, other verses of Swarup Damodar. These three dealing with the descent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or his external reason for descent, Rupa Goswami's verse from his dramas, from, I think it must be from Vidya Madhava, and the two go together, Vidya Madhava, and Rupa, and the internal reasons. Verses of Swarup Damodar Goswami. So it's an extensive Mangal Charan that goes beyond the very principal necessities, if you will, of a Mangal Charan, to have a verse that explains the best essence of the book in a code, so to speak, or in a concise way. It's called the Vastu Nirdesh Sloka, the Vastu Nirdesh, so a condensed form of the truth, what the book's about, the tattva of the book. And Mangal Charan also consists then of a Namaskar verse, where the deity of the book is offered respect, and an Ashirvada verse, a verse in which the author offers his blessings to the readers. So his Mangal Charan has these elements, and as he himself explains, and more. It's extensive. It's 14 verses. And then he goes on to explain these verses. I mean, they're all cited in the first chapter, and he goes on to explain them over 7 chapters. So it's a rather lengthy commentary that he embarks upon on his commentary on his own Mangal Charan. And in doing so, he, expounds upon these 5 principles, which the idea is you have to have. This is the dispensation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This dispensation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is coming from him, so you need Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's a magnanimous appearance of the Godhead. And the Prakash principle you also need, in terms of what he's giving in his descent, because, for example, along with the ideal of the Madhurya Rasa, we find other possibilities as well. If you take Sakya Rasa, for example, this is then you have to have the Prakash, you have to have Balaram in the spiritual sky. You really have to have Madhurya Rasa too, I should say. So Madhurya Rasa, the book the ideal is centered on, is not an island unto itself. Of course, it has support from the other rasas in order for the whole affair, for example, Parakiya, to go on. So you need the Prakash element in terms of what he's giving. He's giving the Braj Bhakti. And even if we focus in on the precise kind of gift of Radha Dasyam, you need the Prakash element. As I mentioned, you need the avatar element. You need the which would involve the distribution. The avatar does the distribution, and you need the gift itself, bhakti, Hmm? This is the Shakti Tattva as he speaks about it. Then you need somebody to give it to, which is the Jiva. So these are the 5 principles that he expounds upon in great detail, as I've said. And here in the 7th chapter, he gets to the last one, Panchatattva, 5 again, Panchatattva Kam Krishnam, Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam, Bhakta Avataram, Bhakta Kyam Namami Bhakta. So the same 5 are glorified. And he gives a brief explanation about the Shakti Tattva here. He explained the Bhakta Tattva obviously is also a Shakti Tattva. Devotees or the Jivatmas who can be devotees are their Purushas and their Prakriti. They're more Purushas when they're in relation to the material nature, and they're more Prakriti when they're in relation to Bhagwan in service. Therefore, we tend to refer to them more as Tatastha Shakti than as Purusha, which is kind of provisional. In relation, that means they're only Purusha in relation to what? In relation to matter. Otherwise, they're not. So, despite the fact that they're also a Shakti Tattva, he's described them in their own category as Bhakta Tattva, and distinguished the Bhakta Tattva from the Shakti Tattva. And of course, as it turns out, the Bhakta Tattva is the Jiva endowed with or infused by the Shakti Tattva or Bhakti. So here in this chapter, he's gives some emphasis, some explanation on the Shakti Tattva, and in the Panchatattva that refers to as far as a person goes, an embodiment of that Shakti Tattva. Who else would it be but Radha, who is the Radha of Gaur Lila? Who is Radha? That is Bhakti Devi, the Swami Shakti, the fountainhead of all Shakti Tattva. Again, Bhakti Devi herself. That said, of course, he doesn't go into great detail about the person of Gadadhar. There are theological reasons for that as the book goes on, but he gives us a brief explanation, and then he segues into a brief description of how these 5 function together in terms of the dispensation of Nam Sankirtan, which is the method, as I often say, to the madness of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and how the Panchatattva came together, and they plundered the storehouse, to use his prophet's poetic rendering of the verses, plundered the storehouse of love of God to distribute it, and the more they distributed it, the more it grew, and so on and so forth, and how such empowered persons are required to effectively distribute the Sankirtan and change the lives, the hearts of people, and so forth is underscored. And as he's speaking about this power of Sankirtan and the Sankirtan's distribution being one that seeks no qualification, it's without discrimination. It doesn't matter what your qualities may be, whether you're a very qualified person, you have no qualities, or you have bad qualities. And then to kind of underscore that point, and particularly with regard to the latter, those who have bad qualities, we find ourselves suddenly in the midst of a narrative, beginning of the narrative of Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it starts, but after this chapter, it stops. So it's curious. The narrative starts where? With Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Benares. That's not the beginning, obviously. That's not the Adi-lila. He's already in his Madhya-lila. He's already a sannyasi. And the story the narrative here in this chapter is told again at the end of the Adi-lila, with more detail, although there's considerable detail given here. And that with regard to the conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Prakashananda Saraswati. And so why this narrative here? Because it's followed in the next 8th chapter by Krishnadasa's explanation of how he came to write the book, how he was blessed by the Vrindavan Goswamis and so on, and got the garland and confirmation of Madan Mohan, and a very beautiful kind of confessional type of writing we find there in that 8th chapter, speaking in his humbleness about the task and how it was bestowed upon him as a service, and how he took it up in old age and with rheumatism, arthritis, he's writing and trying to finish and so forth. And that, of course, chapter is followed by then a number of chapters, we got 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I guess, wherein he goes through this lists of devotees who are the metaphorical branches on the tree of love of God, the Advaita branch, the Nityananda branch, Gadadhar branch, and so forth. And these are beautiful chapters. You could think I just skip over this, just the names of all these, people. But they are the players, of course, in the drama that's about to unfold in chapter, 13, I believe, where the narrative begins in a chronological sense with that which precedes the birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and then his birth, and then we go on somewhat chronologically. But those chapters they should be read just to hear the names of those devotees. They should just be verses, just be chanted. And there's this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, just chanted. And because Gaurangera Korima Nityasiddhi, what is it? Nityasiddhi Gaurangera. It just Narottam sings. Nityasiddha Korimani, Sangigani, Nityasiddha Korimani. Gaurangera Sangigani, the Sangha Gana, the group of association of Gaur. Gaurangera Sangigani, Nityasiddha Korimani. They are all Nityasiddhas. Their company we require in order to become fully developed in terms of Rasananda and thus qualified to participate in the Leela. Again, although the Leelas of Mahaprabhu in terms of dispensation, distribution requires no qualification, it brings us in and qualifies us. Gradually, step by step. And to understand where we are in that gradual development and apply ourselves accordingly, appropriately at that time. This is what is called consideration of adhikar, and what's beautiful, to act in a way that's becoming, that befits you. So there is a hierarchy, and there is indiscriminate distribution at the same time. And anyway, all these names of all the devotees, it's so beautiful to hear their names, and then they'll come up here and there in the narrative. So if you want to have a drama, then you want to have it, at least in the beginning, or sometimes they do it at the end, or partially in the beginning, starring, with a secondary role here. And so here it all comes, and all the players, as many as he could name, unlimited as they are. So here, this narrative section of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Benares seems a bit out of place. And again, it comes up chronologically later in the Adi-lila. But its purpose is twofold, I believe. One is to emphasize the method of Mahaprabhu's madness. Nam Sankirtan, Nam Dharma. So some Abhideya Tattva. The section that precedes this, the entire explanation of his Mongol Charan is quite in depth and quite deep theologically and philosophically, very rich. I mean, it goes so far as to extend into the, from the descriptions of time and space, and then transtemporal, transspatial reality of Vaikuntha, when discussing Nityananda Prabhu and so forth, to the inner space of that spiritual kind of geography of Goloka and the inner desires of Krishna, the most, or what I consider the highest theological questions ever asked and entertained, and they're being asked by God himself, about himself, because theology needs to ask questions about God and answer them. And here God is asking, why, what is it in me that makes her the way she is? Anyway, we know these are very, very extraordinary questions, so very rich, very deep theologically, and it's almost as if, like Prabhupada once at times said that he put a lot of effort into the first canto commentary of his, because he didn't know if he would be amongst us mortals long enough to finish the book. He came to America with 3 volumes. He tried to cram a lot in there in terms of his purports. Sometimes we see in the later volumes of his commentary, the commentary is considerably more sparse. And he quickly, and it should be noted, he quickly did the 10th canto summary study of the Krishna book also, once he set foot here and got some footing. So it's almost as if, and Krishnadas has described himself in this way, he's very old, he didn't know if he would finish the task, and it was difficult for him to even hold the, whatever it was, not pen, I guess, but quill.
Feather, quill, make a feather.
Yeah, and so much is condensed in this Mongol Charan, the whole really essential theology and philosophy of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But the way that he has not spoken at length about that, but he starts to segue into that here, and he'll showcase that in the conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Prakashananda Saraswati, who, the latter, that is, has a different way, and it's not the way of Kali Yuga. And although he's a big scholar, Prakashananda Saraswati, and all he does is study Vedanta, and he has now, at this point in the narrative, questioned Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you're a sannyasi, why aren't you studying Vedanta? And why instead are you singing and dancing like an emotional fanatic with other emotional people? Why aren't you grounded in knowledge, and rather than being swayed by the emotional life and as a result lending yourself to dancing and singing and playing musical instruments? This is not the dharma of a sannyasi. And of course, now Mahaprabhu will have the opportunity to speak as we pick up where we've left off tonight, and he will reply, what is this Nam Sankirtan that he's doing? And he does it in relation to someone who thinks there's something better to do in Kali Yuga, and has seemed to have missed a pretty big point in the scriptures, although he's advocating this is the dharma of a sannyasi, just to study the scripture. Mahaprabhu more or less says, well, if you're, why didn't you catch this point in the scripture that it's Kali Yuga and the only way is the Harinam, Nam Sankirtan, and so on. And so to emphasize the Nam Sankirtan, but also, of course, given who Prakashananda is in all this, to add one final philosophical feature to the introduction of the book. What is that? Well, many positive theological and philosophical points have been raised about what Gaudiya Vaishnavism is. He wants to say now what it's not, and it's not Mayavad. And this Mayavad has had its seat in Benares, and Mahaprabhu was going to Vrindavan through Benares. And he more or less says, in order to get to Vrindavan, you got to pass through this Mayavad stuff and retire it. And there's two ways to retire it. You can ignore it and avoid it, which he did on the way to Vrindavan, or if you get something from your practice, and on the way back you can come defeat altogether. This is what Mahaprabhu did. And so we're hearing him now. We've heard in brief his way there and his way back, and of course how he also met with Sanatana Prabhu, who escaped from the jail, is contained here in brief, and beautiful sections there, very endearing, very insightful, his discussions with Sanatana and so on. But at this point in the narrative, of course, he's staying with Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar. Tapan Mishra was directly sent to Benares by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After he inquired from him, was the goal of life. Having been told by a Brahmin in his dream, with his day waking state, was fully preoccupied with trying to understand the goal of life. In his dream at night, the Brahmin came and said, "Go to this Caitanya, Nimai Pandit, he will tell you the goal." Of course, Tapan Mishra went, and Mahaprabhu showed him who he was. He said, "Don't tell anybody." And this is the goal of life. Chant Hare Krishna, and then go to Benares. And there he went, of course, to Benares, and there's no devotees there. It happened that Chandrasekhar went there as well for something, and of course they're like depicted as the only devotees in a sea of Nirvishesha and Sunyavadi conceptions. And they're wondering, what are they doing there? And of course, one day, Tapan Mishra at the bathing ghat sees as a young and beautiful sannyasin, tall and young, in his 20s. Very rare to see that, and very charming, very beautiful sannyasi. And then he hits him like a great blessing. Nimai Pandit, the word had rippled through the subcontinent, has taken sannyas. Nimai Pandit took sannyas. Nimai Pandit took sannyas. He's gone to Jagannath Puri. And lo and behold, he could understand. He's come to Benares. And so why he sent me here now flashes before him. And Mahaprabhu takes up his residence with Chandrasekhar. He eats his meals with Tapan Mishra. And in due course, they express to him how disturbed they are by the propaganda in the city, which at this point includes vilification of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the part of the sannyasis, leading people of the community, and they could not tolerate it. And so Mahaprabhu makes, by his omniscience, arrangement for a Brahmin to come and invite him to meet with them, although he knows that he never meets with them. But he goes, and where does he sit? Where they wash their feet, in humility, to contrast the pride of the Mayavadins, who, upon taking sannyas, consider themselves God. From our perspective, it's a very prideful way of thinking about oneself, and very different than characteristically humble devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who embrace the mandate of his for humility as if this is the decorum of the devotee. This is the Trinada Pisa Nichana. They should dress in this. Torora Pisa Ishnana, so forth. So Prakasananda is stunned by the beauty of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by his humility, and by his effulgence that he begins to show. It's the very thing that these Mayavadins seek to merge with and think they're theorize that they're one with. So you can imagine how startling it must have been. Mahaprabhu shows a little Aishwarya to deal with them, and a great amount of humility at the same time. And So this way he creates a teaching moment, really. And those who criticized him now are ready to learn from him. And they misunderstood his activities to be in the realm of karma, emotional life, singing, dancing, and so forth. And let me get to the part here. Go ahead, Mark. But what is wrong, of course? It's interesting that he uses words like Babuka, you are a Babuka, an emotionalist. This is the word that the Bhagavatam itself uses to describe those who can take advantage of the spiritually, emotionally alive person. As I was explaining the other day, the fact that we have an emotional life is because our chitta and our antakaran in the psychic dimension of our material sense of self is capable of reflecting the pure consciousness and producing, as a result, an approximation of consciousness. Prabhupada refers to it as contaminated consciousness. So an approximation of consciousness appears in the chitta, and then it reposes itself on matter. And as a result of reposing itself on matter, then this emotional life comes to bear. And we have feelings and thoughts and so on and so forth. That's where we live, in this emotional realm, which is meaningful, of course, obviously, in comparison to the physical, which has no meaning, in a sense, unto itself. But its meaningfulness is limited by the fact that the object that it's reposed in or focused on, matter, is endless, immutable, and all its manifestations therefore are subject to transformation and demise, and so the emotional life, we never get any sthayi. You understand? The object of the emotional, the approximation of consciousness is reposed in, cannot, first of all, it's an approximation of consciousness on the one hand. On the other hand, the object it's reposed in has no capacity to produce an enduring emotional experience, enduring forever without change and so forth, which is the nature of the spiritual relationship, which constitutes what? Pure consciousness, rather than approximation of consciousness, reposed in the perfect object of love, Krishna. And this results in a sthayi, a dominant emotion that defines the person, gives us a personality and so forth, and allows us to experience emotional life proper. So spiritual life is not, like Prakashananda Saraswati thought, doing away with emotions and being still. Might as well be matter. I mean, the Gaudiya perspective is you'd be better off entangled with matter than merged with Brahman. That's their perspective. At least there's a semblance of what your prospect in life is there. And the opportunity to associate with devotees and tread the path that will result in enduring spiritual emotional life. And life is emotional. We want spiritual life, not just spiritual. We want a spiritual life. So this is life, feelings, emotions, love, and so forth. So Prakashananda's idea is you just do away with emotions, try, sit, knowledge, retire false emotions that arise from attachments, and so forth. Separate your consciousness, your chitta from the world, and come to some neutral position of peace and stillness and Of course, their idea is dissolve the false self. There is no real self. You're Brahman, and you end up in contentless experience. Not even that, not even experience, but contentless consciousness. There's no content to be conscious of. You're just pulsating consciousness. There's no object for it to be reposed in, material or spiritual. It's a very abstract idea. And Mahaprabhu doesn't like it. And he wants to tell Prakarsananda, of course, we'll go through it, but in short, spiritual life is not merely the retiring of material emotion, but it's to become situated in spiritual emotion by the gradual process, which involves purifying the consciousness and fully reposing it in the perfect object of love. This means there's a spiritual world, emotional world. As I was saying the other day, in this emotional world is the real world. And there are real hearts, as I said before, that really melt. Now we have a physical heart that's an approximation of a real heart. And then we have an emotional sense of heart, where we say, my heart melted. And the doctor says, no, it didn't. It's still there. We say, no, I mean, so this emotional sense of heart is closer to a real heart than the physical heart. That's just an approximation in the physical world. The approximation of consciousness in Chitta has the power to transform matter, to cause muscles to move, and you get a smile. The smile is not just facial muscles, right? Excuse me, so I'm repeating myself to some of you. I made some of these points earlier, but no, it's much more than that. So we go from the physical movement to the emotional life itself, which is problematic because it's focused on the physical. But from there to emotional life proper itself, arising out of consciousness, pure consciousness, as a result of its being focused on, reposed in Rasaraj himself. And so there's a spiritual world. There's a famous physicist. His name is Sir Roger Penrose. You've probably heard of him. A very celebrated physicist in the world who has a belief that he feels is supportable by reason, and that scientific information or facts can be interpreted to support. His idea is that there is a physical world and there's a mental world, and that there is a mathematical world, which could also be a world of the good and the beauty. Paraphrasing Plato, a world of the absolute good and absolute beauty, which would mean that there is, in his opinion, an objective sense of morality, an objective sense of aesthetics that transcends cultural sensibilities and so forth of this world, and an objective truth, like math is like a truth theorem. And this is his theory, and he does it on the basis of mathematics by explaining that as we look at matter, what do we see? Well, we see a table. Okay, what's the table? A table is wood. What's wood? Wood is a tree. What's a tree? You keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, as they do in modern science, exploring the reality, the physical world. And you find the deeper you go, you start finding things like protons, neutrons, quarks, gluons, and so forth, which the only way that we know about them, that they exist, is through mathematical equations. You can't see them or anything, but the equation is there, and based on the equation, I suppose you do something pragmatic, get a result, and so there's a quirk. There's a glue, they just give anything glue on or something like that. So his theory is that these certain very sophisticated mathematical equations, they so precisely describe the physical world in its deepest kind of, as far as they know, level, in its most virgin state, if you will, that it's hard to imagine that they are something that human mind came up with to describe a human invention, but rather his opinion is that they are discovered or revealed, and they exist as almost like mantras that the world comes out of, and the world corresponds with. And these mathematical equations have their own independent realm has no location and is not physical. So it's a world of sacred, if you will, a sacred geometric space that's transspatial, transtemporal, and it has this ground, if you will, that's very, well, I guess, logical, sound, math, as an example. Philosophy is often said there's a ground, philosophical ground, canvas on which the art of Lila is drawn, and then it has the Lila, the ultimate, the absolute good, the absolute beauty, the absolute charm. And this, of course, is a reasonable kind of a Platonic way of talking about Golok, the spiritual world of spiritual emotion. So sometimes it's useful to employ these types of arguments and so forth in trying to explain, not only to the uninformed, but even to devotees, the nature of the spiritual world. It's not a cartoon. The form of Krishna, the form of the Siddha, that corresponds with Krishna's form for the sake of ultimate emotional life. So this is a far cry from the very bland and abstract and empty idea of the Prakashananda Saraswati, who's sitting there, obviously bored to death, studying the Vedanta while Mahaprabhu is dancing and chanting in the streets in ecstasy. And he's about to get educated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has, at this point, as I mentioned, created a teachable moment, right? And he's got Prakashananda Saraswati's attention. Second, the Prakashananda had said, Sampradayika sannyasi tumi, raha egrame, ki karane ama savar naka darshane. You are the Shankar Sampradaya, you live now in our village here in Varanasi, why don't you associate with, why have you avoided us? Sannyasi hui yakar nartana gayana, babuka, sab sange, lankar sankirtan. You're a sannyasi, but you're doing dancing and singing. Nartana gayana, babuka, you're kind of like, really losing it here. You're emotional. And with your friends, sapsange, lankar sankirtan, you're making sankirtan. Vedanta patan, dhyan, sannyasira dharma. So the way of of Vedanta, which is the dharma of the sannyasi, is dhyan, meditation. He's speaking meditation means that, like, clear the chitta, forget the emotional life, sit, shanti, shanti, shanti. Taha chadi kore kene babuke karma. Why do you give up these activities, the dharma of a sannyasi, and instead engage in babuka karma, means like activities like those in the realm of karma, singing, dancing. So he's thinking that the bhakti of Mahaprabhu is karmic involvement, and bhakti can look like that. So you have one end of the spectrum and the other, karma and bhakti, and they tend to look similar. And in between is this meditation and overtly what appears overtly to be spiritual life, renunciation, and so on and so forth. So bhakti is Vaishnavara Kriyamu to begin Abhujai. Difficult to understand the bhakta. He or she may act like an ordinary person. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was printing the books, riding in the motor car. This is not the dharma of a sannyasi. They should walk barefooted, take no conveyance, wear tree bark, and so on and so forth. So this is a very special thing that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give. It's hard to understand. You have to pay close attention. Have to study the Bhagavatam. Nasta Praisha Bhakti Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya regularly with good association. It transcends the Dharma marg, the karma marg. We see in the modern day so much of Gaudiya Vaishnava is preoccupied with karma marg. Street dharma, the social and religious etiquette and conduct for women in the Varna ashram system. The men are preoccupied, Gaudiya men, with things like this. It's just one example. The moral realm, and so forth. To be a devotee is to transcend the moral realm. It's not to be immoral when you say that, but it has its own sense of morality. If it's favorable for bhakti, it's morally good. If it's not favorable for bhakti, then it should be rejected. It's a higher criterion. So we may have heard these points, but they need to be emphasized. They need to be explained. They need to be taught in such a way that we may not find ourselves in the name of Rupanuga, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, really being engaged in bhakti covered by karma, covered by gyan, for example. Gyan karmadi anavritam, anukulen Krishna anushrivan bhakti rutta. Prabhavi dekiye toma sakshad narayan hina char korekine itiki karan. He says that Prabhave dekiya toma sakshat narayana. You have this prabhav, this opulence, effulgence, that's such that it makes you look like you're directly Narayan. We say we're Narayan, but you look like him, actually. So hinachar karkene, but you are doing the hinachar, the activity, the achar of the hina, of the low people. So why are you karkene? Why are you acting like the lower class people? What's the reason for this? So Prabhu Kahe, Sriman Mahaprabhu speaks. Sri Chaitanya Dev ki jai. Shuna Shripad, listen, Your Holiness. He says, Ihakaran, this is the reason. Guru More Mukha, Guru More Murka Deki, Korila Shashan. My Guru told me that I was a murka, a fool. In this way, Shashan, he chastised me. So, Madhu starts like this, and he's again underscoring the way he includes humility. He says, Murka tumi tomar nahika Vedanta vikar Krishna mantra japo sala e mantra sar. You are a fool, and tomar nahika Vedanta adhikar. You do not have adhikar to study the Vedanta. Krishna mantra japa sala. Always do the japa of Krishna mantra and a mantra sar. This is the essence of all mantras. So first he introduced the japa of Krishna mantra. Now, Krishna mantra means, of course, as you know from Chaitanya Charitamrita, this comes out in the 5th chapter of Adi-lila, that this is the Gopal mantra, Asta, we say, Asta, 18 syllable. Anyway, this is the principal Gopal mantra, and of all mantras, the Krishna mantras are the principal mantras. So this is the mantra of mantras, if you will, the Gopal mantra. As far as a non-mantra, that's another thing. That'll come in here too. But now, first he talks about the Diksha mantra of Gaudiya Vaishnava, the Gopal mantra. There are derivatives of that 18-syllable mantra, like the 10-syllable mantra, where just Gopijana Valavaya Swaha, not including the Govindaya and Krishnaya and so forth. Different versions of that, but they all stem from the original 18-syllable. So he emphasizes that here. Mahaprabhu says, my guru told me I don't have eligibility for studying Vedanta. And of course, he's really saying nobody in Kali Yuga. He's really saying this isn't the Dharma of Kali Yuga. But we do meditation, because he was told this. It's just announced you should do meditation. We do meditation on the Krishna mantra. That's what we meditate on. So we're not like, we're Vaishnavas. We're a different path. We're grounded in the Vedanta also. Our mantra comes from the Shruti, from Gopal Tapani. Have you studied that one? It's a kind of Mahaprabhu. Have you studied Gopal Tapani? There we find our mantra, the Krishna mantra. Gopal. This is not the Gayatri, the Kam Gayatri, corresponds with the Krishna mantra, Gopal mantra. We get it from there. So we know the Shruti. The Guru might said I'm a fool. He's basically saying you are a fool. You study Vedanta, but you didn't study this book. And of course, there's a good argument why the Krishna mantras are the supreme mantra, because Krishna is who he is, and Gopal Tapani makes that point. The supremacy of Krishna. Krishna's two Bhagavan Swayam is emphasized there, obviously. So he says, and in fact, we do our mantra. My guru told me do this mantra, japa of this. Japa means dhyan, meditation. Japa is an anga, a limb of dhyan. So it's done quietly and with concentration, and usually even with Krishna mantra, there's certain things in place, calmness and so forth, so on. Get in the right space. Swami said, Haribhakti Vilasa, Sanatana's recommended pranayam before the dhyan. To get hyperventilated, but very chances. So, I mean, it's powerful into itself, but it's a mantra, and it's, of course, the names of the Godhead there are in a dative case, so it's different than the non-mantra. I get to say, we'll get to that, which is in the vocative case. And as a result, the mantra has some things that go with it, and it requires some qualification. And here he's mentioning Vedanta Adhikar. Tomar nahi ka Vedanta Adhikar. You do not have Adhikar for Vedanta, he's saying, his guru is saying. You have Adhikar for Gopal Mantra. So some Adhikar for Gopal Mantra is required. No Adhikar is required for chanting Hare Krishna. But Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Nam Mantra, will qualify one to be able to receive, take advantage, apply oneself in relation to the Gopal Mantra and do the dhyan. So dhyan, it very practically follows kirtan. Shravanam, kirtanam, the result of which, one of which is ability, adhikar for dhyan, for smaranam. Unlike smaranam or dhyan, kirtan seeks no qualification. And in not seeking qualification, it qualifies one in order to be able to meditate in due course, to sit peacefully. And because why? Because Chaitanya, it's the most effective means for cleansing the heart. So you have to get into the kirtan, it should be loud kirtan, and give the sing from the heart there. You have to sing not with the lips and the tongue, but from the heart. And take your approximation of consciousness, and instead of reposing it in matter, repose it in your whole material, emotional life in Nam Sankirtan. And then that material emotional life will retire, and some eligibility for meditation will result, and naturally. This comes out here very beautifully here. It's a very nice, really, without saying it, explanation of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's approach and Bhakti Vinod's to Raga and Bhakti. See as we go forward. So anyway, he says here, my guru told me I don't have adhikar for Vedanta, study Vedanta. I have adhikar for doing Gopal Mantra Dhyan, Krishna Mantra Dhyan. And this, by the way, is the essence of all mantras. So you can see in a very humble way, and this is how to preach also. In a very humble way, Mahaprabhu was actually speaking about himself. I'm a fool, my guru told me this, and so forth. And he's not confronting him head on with a bunch of religious dogma. He's speaking about himself in such a way that the message is going subtly to Prakashananda, and he's becoming more humble within and learning lessons. There's more than one way to teach a person. So Krishna mantra hoite hove samsar mochan. Krishna naam hoite pavit Krishna rachan. He says that Krishna mantra hoite hove samsar mochan. By chanting this Krishna mantra in japa, in dhyan, derived as it is from the Gopal Tapani, received through Guru Parampara. Again, Vaishnavism is connected with the Vedanta. It's not some aberration from the Vedanta. It's really the essence of the Vedanta. And he says that the result of chanting the Gopal mantra is samsara mochan. Krishna mantra hoite hove samsara mochan. That by chanting the Krishna mantra, you can become liberated. So the mantra dhyan of Gaudiya Vaishnavism reaches its efficacy at a certain point. And it also requires a certain degree of qualification to be entered into, embraced in practice. So Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj gave a nice example to illustrate this verse. If it has a point at which its efficacy is reached and the necessity for it retires, and it has a beginning point that requires certain level of eligibility, it differs then in this regard from Harinam, which requires no qualification, no eligibility, and never retires. So he did it by two circles. He gave an illustration of two circles. One circle is the larger circle. It goes up high and goes down low. And inside that is a smaller circle. The bottom side, being the beginning of that circle, if you will, requires certain qualification to arrive at. And when you get to the top of it, it retires. So it's a smaller circle inside of a larger circle. Now we say, well, why not just chant Harinam? It has no qualification, and it requires no qualification, and it doesn't retire. In a part of Yom, in Goloka, the Nam recedes to the background and manifests itself in a form of service. So it's there. It's not different than Krishna. But anyway, sometimes it's thought like this. Why get the second initiation is proper? We call it, what's the need for the mantra? So, well, Mahaprabhu is speaking about both here. Both are being described. And he's describing the method that his guru taught him. It includes the mantra dhyan on Krishna mantra and Krishna Nam Hoite Pave, Krishna Charan. Krishna mantras, Sansar Mochan, Krishna Charan, Krishna Nam, Krishna Charan, Pave Krishna Charan. So by the mantra you get liberation. Of course, it's a Vaishnava sense of liberation. It means what? Swarupena Vivastiti, Muktirikvanyata Rupam, Swarupena Vivastiti. You get removed from the negative influence, removal of the karma, and you become situated in your Swarup Siddhi. The mantra can retire now, but the Krishna Nam goes on. Krishna Nam, we find this in Brihad Bhagavatam. He got a mantra, right? Kumara got a mantra, and the mantra took him everywhere. And he kept chanting his mantra until he attained his Swarup. And then what did he do? Then from Gokul, Vrindavan on earth, what was his method? He didn't take his mantra to attain the ultimate destination. Swarup Siddhi is the stage before Vastu Siddhi in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's language. So the mantra retired, and what did he do? What was the final practice by which he got his ultimate attainment? Everywhere he went by his mantra, except his final destination. How did he get there?
Kirtan.
By kirtan. What kind of kirtan?
Favorite names of Krishna.
That's right. His favorite names of Krishna. Names of Krishna that corresponded with his own Sakyarasa. And what else did he do? Two things. He did Nam Kirtan of his favorite names and Lila Smarn. That's fostered by the Kirtan and by the previous practices that qualify one and so on and so forth. So this is what's being said here, that the Krishna mantra will take us so far and help us. Nam will qualify us to take advantage of that and receive it. We take advantage of it. It will help us to take advantage of Nam, because Nam is liberated. So when you're liberated, you can take advantage of it more fully, is the idea. So he did, Gopal Kumar's example, and by Nam Sankirtan and Lila Smarnam, fostered by that Kirtan, Kirtana Prabhavi Smarana Swabhavi. Saraswati Thakur made a poem, this is one line, by the power, Kirtana Prabhavi of Kirtan, then this Smarnam, appropriately corresponding Smarnam will ride the eligibility for that and the ability to absorb oneself. So here the point is that it's very nicely made. Both things are required. He received both from his guru. So who's teaching here? This is Chaitanya Deva himself. This is Krishna in his Adi-lila. He's saying, I took initiation and I got these two. I got a Gopal mantra and I got Krishna Nam. And my guru said, engage in this. This is the essence of all practice. So there's not, some people I've heard, with its second initiation, that's just for being a Brahmin. I'm not a Brahmin, so I guess I won't take that. And then they go on and advocate Varnashram or something. There's a lot of confusion about that. But here it's very clear in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Both Mahaprabhu received, both he took advantage of, and what the efficacy of each constitutes. And that's a nice example of what you're doing, the two circles. One helping the other, one qualifying us to take advantage of the other helping us to take advantage of the former. So they work together. I mean, basically, the Nam is in the vocative case, so it can be chanted by anybody, whether they know what they're chanting or not. Oh Krishna, oh Krishna, oh Hari. And with real feeling on the other side, oh Krishna, oh Hari. Whereas the mantra is in supplication. This mantra, dhyan, is because the names in the mantra are in the vocative, or in the dative case, it's a mantra for promoting this supplication where we nivedanam. So this is the focus of sadhana. Sadhana bhakti's focus is Shraddha and what? What corresponds with Shraddha? Sharanagati. Shraddha and Sharanagati. Faith and the corresponding visible expression of that faith. Sharanagati. So sadhana bhakti is primarily about this. Surrender. So the names in the data case, in the mantra, they're about, I give myself to Krishna. I supplicate myself to Govinda. Swaha. Govindaya. Govindaya Swaha. So it's putting in place that dramatic, if you will, stage that's required for the drama of Krishna Lila to appear in the heart, to erect that stage in the heart. So sadhana bhakti is about supplication. These are very powerful mantra to help us in this regard. And when you attain bhav, then, well, the drama started. Really. You might get some practice that comes before that. On the stage of Saranagati, in Ruchi, in Asakti. But when bhava comes, the drama started. It's now the opening night. And I've got to roll. I hope and I've got to, anyway, it's something like that. And then of course the drama's a hit, and so it goes from that stage to another stage of notoriety, to fame and so on. So the mantras. This is the central mantra, the central diksha. Nam is independent of diksha. That's clearly stated in Caitanya Charitamrita. That means it's not dependent on that because it's Krishna himself. He can do whatever he wants. But nonetheless, this is his way. His way is that you receive mantra from Guru Parampara and receive Nam from Guru Parampara. Where else are you going to get it anyway? At least you should acknowledge that's where you got it from. Even if you heard it, on the radio, where did it come from? Where is it? Trace it out. So it's coming from devotees and from powerful devotees, from their hearts. So find one of them and learn them to chant this mantra under their guidance. And then in due course, they give you the Krishna mantra, and your practicing life as a sadhaka is now fully in place, and you've got a sadhaka dheya and the parameters in which you should live and you got to tolerate and so forth, and embrace this decorum of humble, tolerant. And the worst thing is that one another, we have to tolerate one another. We have to get used to that. As I said before, nobody's going anywhere, unfortunately. So mantra is you should know this when you chant the mantra. This is what you're doing. I'm trying to become a surrendered person. I'm trying to, what do they say, tolerate what you can't change and have the strength to change what you can, or something like that. Something like that. So it's got some spirit of that in it. And so when we're successful, then the mantra reaches its efficacy. We may still chant, for example, and so forth. And we saw Prabhupada chant his mantra. But this is the idea. So I think let's move on for a bit here. And so I think we'll stop here and continue reading. It's very instructful, insightful, the whole narrative, so many insights and so forth. So it's a pleasure to go through it with all you sincere people. Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Caitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Sri Gauranga Madhava ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanande.
Bhaktivedanta Tripurari Swami ki jai.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Anandapuri Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande.